Good afternoon and welcome once again to TaxCalc TV. I'm Andy North, CMO here at TaxCalc, and today we're going to be delving into everyone's favourite topic, anti-money laundering. Unfortunately, Dean is poorly today, so he's unable to join us. We do hope you're feeling better, mate. If you were at the Accounting Web Awards last night, a very special hello. I hope you aren't feeling too jaded. And a massive congratulations to all of the winners and the nominees. I know I spoke to a number of you and you're intending to come along today. And what a session we have in store. As I say, we're focusing on practice assurance inspections and in particular how they cover your AML obligations. But fear not, this is TaxCalc TV. We're not going to subject you to an hour of dry technical detail about the definition of firm-wide compliance. We're going to get beyond that and into the mind of the inspector. When your firm gets the dreaded notice, wouldn't it be nice just to know a little bit about what's going on behind that clipboard? We're thrilled to be joined today by Lucy Brown and Mike Jardine, experts in AML and co-founders of Calathea Solutions. Lucy, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yes, hi Andy. So I was a bookkeeper in practice and I had a great interest in compliance. I founded my local branch of bookkeepers in my county and then joined my advisory council of the supervisory body. And within those two roles, I delved into compliance quite a bit and used to really enjoy helping the other members build up their compliance knowledge. After a while, I then sold my business to go and work for a supervisory body. And within that role, I was responsible for the professional conduct of our members. And as part of that, worked very closely with compliance director, Mike. So together we set up, after a while, we left the supervisory body. We set up Calathea Solutions at the beginning of this year to offer those people in accountancy and bookkeeping practices the support that they really want with their AML compliance. So we offer AML audits, we offer training, we do consultancy work to help write document and policy procedure manuals, those kind of things. And we find that because we've got no association with a supervisory body now, that our clients can come to us in the comfort that it's not going to trigger an inspection and they won't get judged on their compliance level. We're just there to help them get more compliant. We named ourselves Calathea Solutions. I don't know if people are aware, but the Calathea houseplant turns over its leaves in the dark. So we're all about new starts, getting things better, turning over that new leaf.
Awesome. Lovely story. And the firms that you work with are primarily small firms, big firms?
It ranges. We've got a lot of sole practitioners as clients, but also those with up to 15 staff really so far. So and we're able, because the regulations and legislation is the same for everybody, it doesn't matter the size of the firm.
Really across the board that you work with. And Mike, what's his background?
So Mike is ex-law enforcement, worked nationally and internationally investigating financial crime, went into the banking sector to work again financial crime and insider threat before moving to supervisory body.
Right. I see. So the inspector.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, he inspected me when I was in practice.
Ah, right. Right. Okay. So this is how you met.
Inspected my firm. Yeah.
Fabulous. So we do have a lot to cover today. We're going to start with a short overview of the latest regulations, what you have to do and when, just in case anyone watching is a little bit behind the curve on what an inspection will look at. And I should say at this point, we've had a record-breaking number of registrations for today. 2,000 people have signed up. So I'm imagining there is going to be a very broad spectrum of compliance among you all. We're then going to get some insights into where most firms are going wrong. What are Mike and Lucy seeing that is tripping firms up and potentially earning them like a fine or a re-inspection. And finally, we're going to probe into what inspectors are really looking for. What might they see in a practice that tells them they might want to just look a little deeper? What behaviours might indicate that all is not well? Interested? You should be. Before we start, there's the obligatory housekeeping. Yes, we will be sending out a copy of this at the end. You don't need to take notes. And you have two options on the screen. You have got the chat and you've got the Q&A. The chat is for everybody. If you want to post a comment for the whole audience to see and read, post it in there. We do have Siobhan, who is going to be on the chat as well. She's one of the product owners for our AML product, so any technical questions she should be able to field. And the Q&A is if you just want to post a question to us, that will not be seen by the rest of the audience. So, before we start, I think we're going to get into the regulations. So what is it that a firm needs to do, Mike?
Absolutely. As I say, we're not going to bore you with reams and reams of regulations, but just give you an overview in relation to what's required for those that may not know or would like a little bit of an update. I think that the main thing to start off with is what we're saying is make sure that you know your client, who they are, what they're about, but also make sure that you understand the firm. What do they do? Where does the source of income come from, etc. Where do they do the business? You need to really understand your client and what they do before you can move on to the next stage of this in relation to doing your client risk assessment. And once you've done your client risk assessment, you then need to move on to your whole of firm risk assessment. So you're identifying what issues there are with your client, understanding what the norm is. It's so important to understand what the norm is. Then when things change, you can think, wow, that's not quite right. That's abnormal. Is that a red flag? Is that something I need to investigate further? And then once you've done your client and you've looked at the risks in relation to your client, have a look at your firm. This is where your whole of firm risk assessment or your firm-wide risk assessment comes into it. Have a look at what risks are going to affect your firm and how you're going to mitigate those risks. And you've got to detail all those risks in your whole of firm risk assessment. What risks you've identified in relation to your client, the geography you and they work in, the services you offer, and the way you offer those services, the transactions and the delivery method. Identify those risks, put them in your firm-wide risk assessment, and then mitigate those risks in your policies, controls and procedure statements. That's so important. So it's a stage system. Identify the risks, mitigate the risks. And then once you've done that, then at least you'll be able to show to the inspector or the reviewer exactly what you're doing and that you understand that. Next important thing is your training. Make sure that anybody that's classed under the legislation as a relevant employee, and a relevant employee is somebody that may identify money laundering. So make sure that your relevant employees are suitably skilled to do the job in relation to your business, and that they are persons of integrity. Then you must make sure that they've got the training. Make sure that you give them the training so they can identify any red flags that they can then bring to the attention of your money laundering reporting officer, anything that's suspicious that might need a little bit of further investigation. Plus your employees then feel part of the team. They feel part of your the bigger picture, the bigger practice. But in relation to what Andy was saying earlier in relation to current topical items, a requirement under the legislation as of last September was that in your whole of firm risk assessment, you need to identify any risks that you identify in relation to proliferation financing. And then you also have to mitigate that in your policies, controls and procedures statement. It's something that came in September when some of the regulations were amended. It's something that we're seeing quite regularly, which we'll come on to later, quite regularly that people are unaware of. And it's so important because you will be, if you are reviewed, it's they're called reviews now rather than inspections. If you are reviewed, it'll be expected to see comment in your whole of firm risk assessment and your policies and controls in relation to that. So that's something that, as I say, it came in September, but we're still seeing people that are falling foul of not including that. Also, in relation to when you submit a suspicious activity report to the UK FIU, the UK Financial Intelligence Unit, part of the NCA, they've brought out a new portal. A lot of people, I understand, have already registered on this portal, but it's important that you register on there. So if you do find yourself in the position where you need to submit a suspicious activity report, you're already registered on there, and there's some new guidelines in relation to that on the National Crime Agency website. And I think the biggie that's coming down the track is the the review of the professional body supervisor landscape. As you know, there are a number of professional body supervisors out there. You can all choose which you want to go to. There have been mutins in the corridors of power, that the current system is not working. And to that end, there was a white paper that concluded on the 30th of September for comment in relation to what the structure should look like going forward. And there were four options, and anybody could comment on these options up until the 30th of September. But the first option was what they called OPBAS Plus. Now, OPBAS is the Office of Professional Body Supervisors who supervise the supervisors. Now, OPBAS Plus one was in relation to giving OPBAS more powers than they already have. That's what number one was. Secondly, whether they were going to consolidate the professional body supervisors, and they were looking at whether to have either 2 or 6 of the existing professional body supervisors to come together and be one supervisor, for want of a better word, in relation to money laundering, to give some consistency. And then the third option was a single professional services supervisor, which would also encompass not only the accounting sector, but also the legal sector. So solicitors, etc., that are currently supervised by the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, they would come underneath that umbrella, together with some little areas of HMRC would fall underneath that option. And then the fourth and final option was a single AML supervisor, which would include the Financial Conduct Authority side of the money laundering, and also the Gambling Commission. So that's one, again, supervisor covering everything. It's all in the melting pot. Depending upon who you speak to, depends on which one we think is going to come to fruition. But if it all boils down to cost, no doubt it may be OPBAS Plus, because the system is already in place. It just more powers to them. So that will be a big change, if there is big changes in relation to that coming down the line. So
are you seeing, I know we talked about this earlier, I'm hearing a lot anecdotally from our customers that there seem to be significantly more checks going on, more inspections, but that may not be.
Yeah, and again, to get a true reflection of that, each supervisory body has to submit their annual report round about this time of year and publish it on their website. So again, without analysing the data from all of those supervisory reports, it's difficult to say. But there are mutings out there that the accountancy sector still aren't doing enough. They're felt to be the gatekeepers to the financial sector, because they're the first port of call. They can see what's going on, rightly or wrongly. But we'll be able to analyse those reports in the coming weeks, and we'll be able to see whether there has been an increase in that, because there is the requirement for the supervisory bodies to identify any shortcomings within their supervised landscape.
And they're getting OPBAS are putting pressure on them to.
I don't know so much about whether OPBAS put pressure on them, but OPBAS will explain to them what their obligations are in relation to it. They need to, from a risk-based approach, identify those of their supervised entities that are not performing how they should be performing, to bring them to task.
Okay, and I think another point it's worth remembering is that it's everything that we say today, your experience is going to vary according to which body that you're being supervised by.
Yeah, absolutely. Each supervisory body will interpret the legislation slightly differently and bring on board as well their own membership rules. So some will say you need to use a particular AML software. Others might. So yes, they will all do it differently. They will all investigate slightly differently, and the penalties that they might bring in will vary accordingly.
Right. Okay. So let's get on. So I want to ask you a question. So I'm going to bring up the polls. The question for this poll is how confident are you? We just want to gauge what the general feeling is of how well your firm currently complies with the AML regulation. So that should come up in the poll section at the bottom. If you want to tell us how you feel about that, it looks like people are reasonably confident so far. We'll keep an eye on that over a while. What's your take on that question when you're out and about? Are the majority of firms pretty good, close? Are the majority kind of well off?
I think it varies quite wildly, really. Some firms will have a compliance culture within their firm, but because they don't fully understand the regulations and what is required of them, they won't be putting all the actions in place. So although they think they have a handle on it, they're missing some vital parts, and that could enable a money launderer to come on board as a client, which would be really unfortunate, especially as they are really, really trying. And then you do come across people who go, oh, I know I should be doing it, but I have no idea where to start, so I haven't really bothered.
Right.
So you get a whole spectrum. It varies massively.
Well, looking at this, the results that most people, 72%, are reasonably confident. They're just looking for a refresher. 24% not confident at all, and we've got just a few very confident people who are just itching to be inspected. So I like your attitude there. Okay, so thank you very much for taking part in that. So let's get into just a bit more of the murky stuff. So let's look at where most firms are going wrong. What is it that is people are being picked up for that weren't expecting to?
Again, yeah, I think it's important to say as well that when a supervisory body is deciding who to inspect, they will look at the background of a firm and try and analyse whether they are compliant or not to begin with, and they will go, because they are asked to apply a risk-based approach, and inspect those that they expect to fail. So immediately you're likely, but not absolutely certain, to have a few flaws in your practice already. So when they go in, some of the things that we find from when we've looked at these annual reviews are quite commonplace, are where a firm doesn't have a whole firm risk assessment. So they haven't analysed the risk to their firm. So often a firm will know that they need to do the client due diligence and the client risk assessment, but will miss that bigger picture of what that means to their firm as a whole. And then off the back of that, they then haven't mitigated the risks because they haven't identified them. So they won't have a policy and procedure document. So those are two big ones. And I think when we have analysed the figures, it comes to about 50-50 in inspections. So 50% won't have them, 50% will. We also find that a lot of people feel that they know their client. So they might have had a client on their books for many years, or it's a family member, or it's someone they grew up with. And because they feel they know their client, they then don't do the client due diligence, they don't do a client risk assessment. It doesn't matter how long you've known your client or how well you feel you know them, you need to do those actions. It's legislative. Other things that they do, so if you then change the service you're offering your client, or something changes within your client's business, you might have to re-risk assess them, or just review the documentation you've got. And that's often, you'll do those bits when you're taking on a client, but you won't think to come back to it. So that's the ongoing monitoring of your clients. As Mike said, proliferation financing, that's a big one that's coming in. Now, we haven't actually defined what proliferation financing is, and if people don't know what that is, the money laundering regulations define it as the act of providing funds or financial services for use in whole or in part in the manufacture, acquisition, development, transport or stockpiling of chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons.
Which is commonplace around Wokingham in particular.
Well,
There's a lot of nukes.
So those in Wokingham, just make sure you add it in. Again, it's not likely that you will have a client who's doing that. It's not likely that you will have someone financing terrorism, but you need to be aware that that risk is there, and you need to check to see whether it applies to your practice. And if you don't, or you don't document it, if you have an inspection, you will have failed that bit of it. So, however
unlikely it may be, you still need to do that.
And with everything we say, it's about documenting and justifying. So document it, well, decide whether there's a risk, document it either way, and justify why you've done so.
So a couple of questions just to come back on that. And by the way, I'm seeing we are getting a lot of questions coming through in the chat. We will try and come back to those probably at the end. But there's some that I'll bring up. But you mentioned earlier about the risk-based assessment that is made to whether to do an inspection or not. Do you have any insight or anything that what are they looking for? How do they determine they haven't got a firm-wide risk assessment without doing the inspection?
Oh, again, I haven't worked with every supervisory body, and it would differ slightly for them. Now, lots of the supervisory bodies will ask their members to send in these documents on an annual basis. So if you are not sending them in, or they are insufficient in their content, that could trigger. Where I said that some supervisory bodies ask you to record all your clients on their software, they would have oversight of that and either see that they're not being risk assessed on a regular basis, or it could be that the supervisor will look at your social media footprint and see that you are showing testimonials for an awful lot of clients, and it doesn't seem that in reality that is actual practice, or it's just where things might not tally up. So the inspector, as I'm sure Mike will go on to explain later, will look at the open source research that's available to them and form a picture. And if that doesn't tally with the picture the supervisor already has,
that's where it is.
That could flag her.
So there's not a great deal you can do apart from make sure that you're on top of your admin.
Absolutely.
That's really the message.
That's
there.
the key, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then another point, and I'll ask this to Mike. We were talking earlier, what are the kind of fines? What are you seeing? Are they becoming more draconian? What are the penalties that are being
Again,
applied?
looking at the annual reports, and there are some very high fines being dished out. And they're across the spectrum, really, from a couple of hundred up to the thousands. And if you look at the HMRC website for the people that they supervise, there's fines there into the millions for these larger companies. Yeah. But when you look at the breaches of the regulations, they're all very similar, as Lucy said: not having a whole of firm risk assessment, not mitigating risks, not doing your due diligence on your clients. It's very similar in relation to that. So there is really is a wide range of fines out there.
Because you mentioned some eye-watering numbers when we were chatting earlier.
Yeah, there's some on the HMRC website running to the millions. Really doing this, quite a lot of 50,000, 30,000. Yeah.
And that's levied on an individual?
All the way down. Well, the legislation allows the fines to be levied on individuals if they could be held responsible for it. For argument's sake, the money laundering reporting officer. There was a case recently where the money laundering reporting officer for a firm was fined in excess of £600,000 personally, and it's impacted that person in relation to their business activities going forward because they're barred from carrying out that role. Yeah. So the fines are there, they are big. It's not the only tool in the toolbox that the supervisory bodies have, but reading the annual reports, that's what I'd be interested to see this year's annual reports, to see if anything's changed from last year.
Okay, we'll certainly do that. A couple of questions that I'd like to just throw at you. So John asks, if you take on a new client, let's say you assess as a medium risk, would then have to do This keeps moving. Will then have to do a firm-wide assessment due to this, and then do another firm-wide assessment if you take on a client who is high risk. If you've had only low risk, I think I can see where he's going with that.
Your firm-wide risk assessment should reflect the risk assessments across your client base. So if that then changes, you should update your firm-wide risk assessment to reflect that. The risks that you identify might not change, but it might raise the general risk profile of your practice. So in theory, yes, you should update it every time you take on a client. In practice, again, it's about applying a risk-based approach. So if your firm-wide risk assessment actually states how many clients you've got and what their risk rating is, then yes, because as soon as you take on another client, that's going to be old news. It's wrong. If it has a general risk rating and you've got 200 medium risk clients and you take on one high risk client, it probably doesn't actually change your overall risk rating. So in that case, probably not. But we'd always say that you need to check what your supervisory body would say and advise.
Yeah.
Because it is them that are going to come in and check it.
Okay. We are getting a lot of questions here around electronic checks and ID. I'm trying to summarise them all. Are electronic checks sufficient? Do you need ID check software? How often should you be doing those checks? I don't know if you could summarise an answer to all of those questions.
Yeah, of course.
In one sentence.
One sentence. One sentence. No. So. Online ID verification is a really useful tool to back up the information you have taken from your client. So the online verifications will often do an politically exposed person check as well as a sanctions check. Those are two things that you have to have in your toolkit, in your risk assessment, and therefore they kind of tick those boxes as well as giving you information as to whether the ID is valid ID. What an online verification cannot do, unless there's really good biometric tests, is confirm that the person you have the ID for is the person that has given it to you. So you could have someone ring you up, ask you to be their client, and it might not be their passport that they're giving you. Yeah. So you've got to bear in mind that you need to satisfy yourself that is the right documentation.
So meeting them, for example.
Yeah. So the Fifth Money Laundering Directive says that you can do online verification of your clients. However, it is important that you decide that the level of depth that you go into is appropriate for your business and what your supervisory body would say.
Okay. Thank you for that. And just one kind of related question. Martin says that he's a one-man band. Now, I'm presuming he means it's on his own
sole
as
practitioner.
opposed to the music. I'm not sure one-man bands would need AML. Sorry, bad joke. Do I really need to assess all clients every year, including electronic check?
Okay, so the regulations say you need to assess your clients regularly. They don't specify the definition of regular. Most supervisory bodies would say annually, and you should do it annually, and make sure that the regulations also say that your documentation that you retain for your client should be kept up to date. So that's a complete bugbear as well, because some supervisory bodies really do say it needs to be kept up to date. If you have ID that goes out of date, you need to get new ID in. Some are not quite so firm on that. So again, check with your supervisory body as to what their take on that bit of the legislation is. Online checks, there is actually no requirement to do an online check. They're just useful because they add that extra bit of comfort to you with risk assessing your client. So no, there's no obligation to do an online check, but you do need to regularly review and risk assess your clients.
Right. Okay, so there's a lot to be done. Thank you for that. So we're moving through now. I think the really interesting point. I did promise we weren't going to make this into a dry piece about regulations. So what we really want to get into is, so Mike used to be an inspector. What is going on in your mind when you're in a practice and you're interested in real life stories? But give us an example of what happens. What are you seeing that makes you think something isn't right?
I think before I go on to that, if I give you a real life case study, which was something which it's all true. That's something that I was involved with before I was involved in doing inspection, and this was in relation to an accountant that had a relatively large practice in an area of the UK, and it's all about doing your ongoing monitoring. And what I said at the start of this was make sure you understand your client, make sure you understand what the norm is, then you can identify when it's not normal. This accountant had a client that was a farmer, and he was getting income from a series of barns he had on his premises, and regular income coming in, renting the barns out for various things. The bottom fell out of the market in relation to that for whatever reason, and all of a sudden the client, the farmer, found himself on the verge of possibly losing his farm. He was then approached sometime later, some months later, by a group of people who wanted to rent his barns and offered above the going rate for the barns, which he gladly took. Gladly took the going rate. They wanted to pay in cash. He took the cash and declared it to his accountant. For the rental of the barns, this is how much I'm getting, way above to what he was already getting, and carried on happily. It transpired a bit later on, and I'm talking about a number of years later on, that this group of people were in fact an organised crime group that were growing cannabis in the barns and also manufacturing amphetamine in the barns. And they struck up a really good relationship with the farmer. The farmer said he never went in the barns, wasn't aware of it. He was getting good cash for it, and off he went, declaring it all to his accountant. The organised crime team then asked the farmer who their accountant was, who his accountant was, because they wanted an accountant themselves. So he said, "Oh yes, I used ABC Accounts Limited down the road. I'll recommend you to you. He's as good as gold." They asked what checks he does. "Oh, he doesn't do any. No, if I recommend you, you'll be absolutely fine." So the organised crime group went off to the accountant. No checks were carried out. You come on recommendation from the farmer. That's absolutely fine. And he started doing their accounts, and basically they were laundering their ill-gotten gains through some other businesses that were there as front companies. To cut a long story short, the accountant never once asked about the change in income for the farmer. The farmer said if he had have asked, he'd have told him where it was coming from, because it was a large increase in revenue coming in. To cut a long story short, the law enforcement got involved, the barns were raided, all the illegal drug activity was identified, and you'll find with law enforcement, when they're investigating something, one of the first things you want to do is identify where the money is. There's lots of people serving time in prison currently and in the past where they've been ordered by a judge to forfeit their ill-gotten gains, as in the cash that they've made, or serve an additional term imprisonment. 9 times out of 10, if not more, they will serve an additional term imprisonment because they don't want to hand over the cash. So law enforcement want to identify where the money's going. The first thing to identify is, are they putting it through a legitimate business? Quickly identify who the accountant was, and again, law enforcement will go and see the accountant, and depending upon what the accountant, the bookkeeper says, will be a difference between whether you write a statement to say, yes, I did all my checks, I'd got where's my firm risk assessment is, all this, etc., or whether you sat in the back of the police car going down for a cosier chat down at the police station. This accountant didn't do his ongoing monitoring. as soon as the additional funds started going into that, being declared by the farmer, and it was above the norm, he knew what the norm was. The norm was X amount, then the norm was nothing, and then it shot back right up here. He didn't do his ongoing monitoring. If he had been doing his ongoing monitoring, he should have questioned that. If he'd have been suspicious of that, he should have submitted a suspicious activity report. It transpires that the reason why law enforcement were involved in that is because somebody had submitted a suspicious activity report about something else that the organised crime team were doing, which brought them onto this scenario. So that's why it's important to do your ongoing monitoring. Understand what's normal before you can decide whether there's a red flag or not. And then the added thing with that was what this organised crime team were doing, were recommending their mates to the solicitor. And the question was, well, what checks does he? Oh, he doesn't do any checks. He's fine, you know. But we recommend you be fine. That's what happened with us. So that accountant's books, there was over 50% of the clients on his books were laundering money through similar schemes. So again, just going back to the importance of understanding your client, understanding the norm, and when it's not, do something about it, because you just don't know what else is going on. You don't know what else is going on out there that will bring the police to your door, and it's your reputation, your livelihood ultimately. So
coming soon to BBC Two, you keep an eye out for that. That's I think there is a case for having the anti-money launderer should be a series, a whodunit drama type thing. So no, I think that's really interesting, because I hear a lot from our customers and people generally. They can't really see that this anti-money laundering thing is in any way relevant to them. I've known these guys for 25 years. They're not money laundering, and
I've got lots of stories from about, but all true in relation to that. And it's important to understand what people will do when the backs are against the wall in times of financial hardship, cost of living crisis, COVID, etc., etc. People who you wouldn't think would normally do something and turn to crime or turn a blind eye, they'll do it. And I've got examples where family members have done it, both in the accountancy practice together, and one's gone off the rails because they needed money. So it does happen, and it does happen a lot.
Absolutely. So right. So what else are you looking for?
What I'd say first of all is if you get the phone call from your professional supervisors, don't panic. That's the first thing I'd say. I know it's easy for me to say, but don't. But you need to understand what you should have in place. You'll find that you'll get notification of an inspection. It won't be like an Ofsted inspection. We're coming tomorrow. It'll be you'll be given notice. So make sure you've got something in place. From an inspector's perspective, there's nothing worse than giving you the heads up that I'm coming to see you, and you arrive there and they haven't done anything about it. They don't know where any documentation is, etc., etc. So make sure you understand what you should have in place. Check your professional body supervisor's requirements, like Lucy touched on before. Some of them have certain things that you should be doing. And make sure you've got everything to hand. Again, there's nothing worse than saying, can I see a whole of firm risk assessment? Oh, it's here somewhere and I can't find it. And whether it's delaying tactics, I don't know. And again, your social media, make sure that it does reflect your business and what you're portraying to the inspector or to your supervisor, that is who you are. And then ask yourself, can I demonstrate that I have adopted a compliance culture within my firm? Because that's what I'll ask you, or I would have asked you. I don't do them anymore, obviously, but when I'm going to see the clients that we have, I'll ask them this. Can you demonstrate you've got a compliance culture in your firm? And I want you to be able to demonstrate to me why you're doing something, and not just because you have to. I'll ask you, why do you do that? Why do you do your whole of firm risk assessment? I need you to understand why you do it, what's behind it, as we explained earlier. I don't want it to be a box ticking exercise, that you're just ticking boxes and you don't really understand the reason why you're doing something, because it'll become blatantly obvious that you don't know why you're doing it. And what you've got to think back is the reason for all this in the first place. It's to try and stop the criminal laundering the money through your practice. And be confident in what you're doing and why you're doing it. Just It's great when you're doing inspections, somebody's really confident, well, I do this because I'm doing that. And again, you're getting the inspector, whether you're lulling them into a false sense of security or not, I don't know, but you're getting them on side, basically. And then there's a few do's and don'ts. Do understand your client, as I said before, and think of it as the 5WH, who, what, why, when, where, and how. If you think about your client, then who are they, what are they, etc. Go through that and make sure you understand that, because you'll be asked that. Who's your client? What do they do? Where do they do it? How do they do it? Make sure you understand that, because if you don't understand that, how can you understand what risks there are to you taking on that person as a client, whether you want to take them on? As I said, be prepared and have your documents ready, and engage with the reviewer and the process. Just engage with them. Again, some people you'll find don't want to engage, they don't want you to be there, which is understandable, but don't show it. And be honest, and don't backdate documents. There's been some in the press recently where somebody's backdated documents. Have you got your whole of firm risk assessment? Yeah, it's here. And then you'll look at the properties on the document. If it's a Word document, look at the properties and you'll see it was created the day before you were due to attend there, and they've signed it 12 months ago. It just, your integrity and honesty is out of the window. Check your social media. Your website, does it reflect it? Does the amount of... People tend to use websites as obviously as the shop window into their business. These are how many employees I've got. This is that. Make sure that it tallies with what you've told your professional body supervisor. That's what you've got. And be timely and address the issues that are required. You'll be given, and again it varies between supervisors. You'll be given an action plan to put things right and a time limit to do it in. Don't make excuses as to why you've not done it. If you need more time, ask, and if you're given more time, great. But don't try and fob off what is going to be the inevitable ultimately. Don't ignore your AML obligations. Make sure you understand them, because it's not going to go away. If anything, it's going to get more intense, I think, in relation to it, because the powers to be believe that the accountancy sector is still not doing enough to combat money laundering because it's still going on. So it won't go away, but if you don't put it right, your practice licence might. Again, don't falsify documents or tell lies. You don't know what the inspector knows. And if you try to blag the inspector and your integrity and honesty is out the window. And also say don't use templated documents, but that's not don't use them, but don't use them unless you tailor it towards your business. Again, Lucy and I see when we go and speak people who are using a templated document and they'll lovely.
You mean for procedures and process?
For whole of firm risk assessment or something like that. And the whole of firm risk assessment will say, I'm a trust and company service provider. I provide a registered address for my clients. And in the policies and procedures statement, it'll say, and this is how I mitigate it. And you bring it up to them and say, well, I don't do that. Well, your document says it does. Oh yeah, it's a template. I just downloaded it and filled it in. Make sure it reflects. That happens a lot. Lucy and I are saying it happens a lot. Don't employ delaying tactics. We've seen them all before. Probably done them in a time as well. Don't employ them. If you're having problems, engage, as I say, with the process. And most importantly, after it's gone, after the inspection's completed, whether you've passed, failed, compliant, non-compliant, generally compliant, don't regress. Don't go back on it, because again, we've seen this. I've seen this recently with a client I've been working with, where they've been inspected, failed the inspection, got everything up and ready, passed the re-inspection, and then contacted me to say, I'm being inspected again. You go and see them, provide our services to them, and it's all out of date again. It's gone. It's a lot of time and effort to do something from scratch, but as Lucy will probably say, that if you're doing it as you go along, from a bookkeeper's perspective, if you're doing it as you go along, it's dead easy to keep on top of it. Now, a lot of people say, well, it's not fee earning. I don't get anything for it. All this extra work, and lots of people build it into their fees. Have an element of your fees to cover that. I mean, that's something for yourself in relation to it. But what I will say is, it may not be fee earning per se, But if you don't get it right, you won't be earning any fee because you won't be allowed to practice if worst case scenario. And this is all about protecting your business, your reputation and your livelihood. But the main reason for the legislators is to detect and prevent financial crime and fraud. But you've got to keep all those in your line of sight when you're carrying out this work. But the best thing to do is to understand what your obligations are. You know, after this webinar, if you're not sure, go and have a look at what you're required to do. Get it in order, and when they get that knock on the door or the phone call, you'll be pretty confident you know what you're doing, and you'll pass with flying colours.
Awesome, thank you. So the message there really being that portraying yourself as kind of understanding and caring about doing this would set an inspector at ease a lot more than.
Yeah, if you can prove what you're doing, if I'm saying to you, have you got a compliance culture in your firm? Oh yeah, I do this, I do that, and a lot of people will say, yeah, I do this, and I've done this, and I know I don't need to do this, but I've got this as well, and it gives me,
right,
would give me confidence to say, yeah, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, Lucy and I, we do these reviews for people on a regular basis now, and then we'll come back and they'll say, oh, they were really, really good. They've got this, really good takeaways from it. But it puts them in a position to feel confident in what they're doing, that they've got everything right and in order.
Great, thank you very much. Now, I do have a few questions, particularly about our farmer. Who is so just for clarity, and it's some interesting points that. Yeah. So someone said, I'm most certainly not investigating the clients of my clients. You know, where does this stop? How about the clients of my clients? But another one, in the example given, the client wasn't money laundering. He was receiving rent and declaring it on his tax return. Yeah,
I never said that the farmer was doing that. The farmer was ultimately arrested because if he was complicit. But the issue with all this, nobody's asking you to investigate clients of your clients. It's doing what you should be doing. So as the accountant there, their ongoing monitoring would have seen that there was a massive increase in income, way and above what used to be coming in for the rental of those barns. And it was of cash, which cash is a known for money laundering. So you're just carrying out your obligations on the money laundering regulations. You'd see a red flag.
So it's and that is your obligation to file the suspicious activity report, and then you're fine. You're covered.
And then you've got to make the decision. Then is if you think they are doing something untoward, again the relationship. Like that farmer said, if the accountant had said to him, and I told him there's some people in my barns give me all this money, would you be suspicious? Suspicious is subjective. If you're suspicious you've got these people renting straight away, the rent in the barns for over and above the odds, because the farmers said so. The accounts previously show that it's all in cash. That's the red flags. So you submit your suspicious activity report if you're suspicious, and then you decide what you're going to do with your client.
So it's not on the accountant to be going down to those barns, finding out what's going on.
Not at all.
With his gun.
Well, that's another old news story. But it's and that scenario, the farmer was naive more than anything. Right. But there was an element at the time, I remember, where people were saying, well, hang on, if you're getting double the money for your barns, you know what the going rate is, and yet you're taking double the odds, are you not complicit in something that's going on?
Willful blindness going on, isn't there? And I think it's also important to note that if you then decide, if you're looking at a case and you're thinking, am I suspicious or not? And you decide that you are not suspicious, because you've had that thought process, you need to have an internal report that documents the process you've gone through to decide that you are suspicious or that you're not suspicious. It's got to be documented so that later, when another event happens and you've got another internal report, it might build this picture that actually there is now a suspicion because A, B and C has happened.
But in that circumstance, isn't it easier simply just to file a suspicious activity report and be on the safe side? And
not if you don't have a suspicion. you should only file a suspicious activity report if you have a suspicion. If you and a suspicion, as Mike has said, is subjective. It's an idea that something is going on, but that idea has to be more than fanciful. But it doesn't have to be. You don't have to have proof. So yes, you could do, but if we all filed suspicious activities reports on every client just to cover our own backsides, the system would be clogged, wouldn't it? I don't know if you have another.
No, it's true,
input to that,
and you've
Mike.
got to be able to justify your position if at a later date, like with that scenario, you get the knock on the door and they say, well, were you not suspicious about that? You know, all this cash coming in, etc. As long as you can justify why you've done something or not done something.
So, question from Andrew here said that if the accountant asks the farmer, and we are getting a bit obsessed with the farmer.
Yeah,
we'll probably have to move. The accountant asks the farmer why the rise in rents. The farmer then just says the new tenant pays over the odds. Is the accountant off the hook?
You have to ask more than the questions. Like, why is he paying over the odds? Why is he paying in cash? Right. You know, I mean, and it was huge. How was he paying you? I mean, the guy was turning up in bin bags with cash, carrier bags with cash. To me, that's suspicious.
I think you've got to put that in the slightly iffy category.
Absolutely,
you? Bags of cash.
I would rather submit a SAR in a circumstance like that than not submit a SAR, and then somebody explained to me, well, do you not think that was suspicious?
Yeah. Okay. Right. So thank you very much. I'm very conscious of time. We've got a lot of questions, whether we're going to get through them. A lot of them are kind of regulatory. But just touch on software, because TaxCalc is a software company. And we produce AML software. But what's the general impression from an inspector's point of view? Do they much prefer it if you're using software? Are they less bothered? I mean, I don't know who wants to.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, doing inspections, I'm not bothered what you use as long as you're doing what you should be doing, conforming to the legislation.
Right.
There's lots of software out there. As we know, we were at the Caltex at Manchester a couple of weeks ago, and there's new ones springing up all over the place. And again, if it helps you to do your business and you're conforming to the legislation, then great. You know, use the best one that suits your business.
Yeah, because I think that they all largely do the same thing. It's just how they do it that makes the difference. I should say, the TaxCalc AML software. We had a question from Adam who wants an end-to-end demo of our AML product. We can certainly help you with that. Essentially, I think, as all softwares do, it will allow you to keep a track of all of the reports, all of the statuses of each one of your clients, the firm-wide assessment, risk assessment, and primarily to evidence that. So when Mike comes knocking, you can very easily show that you have done your work, and you can keep that nice and ordered.
And I think that's where they are really, really helpful. From my experience as a bookkeeper, having software that tells me when a review is needed, what paperwork I have, and when it expires, and that audit trail of having done those reviews, everything's then, and they all, I think they all now have the ability to do your firm-wide risk assessment and even potentially pull through information from your clients and a policy and procedure document. It's all in one place. You've got it all there. It's all dated. It's all audit tracked. And as you say, when an inspector comes in, you will have it there ready to provide to them. Your inspection is going to be shorter. Your inspector is going to be happy that they have the confidence that you have all that paperwork and documentation. You just have to prove to them then that you understand why you're doing it.
Right. And I've got to share this because I'm so proud of it. So Isabella from Number Crunchers texted in to say to us a few days ago, we've just gone through our AAT inspection, which covers lots of things, but the biggie is AML. It was my partner dealing with it, and when he told them we use TaxCalc, they more or less closed that side of the questioning as they're aware of how good it is. I just wanted to share that. We're very proud of our AML software, and yes, we can organise a demo. There'll be some details at the end about how you can contact our sales team as well. So let's get into the questions because there's quite a few, and you can probably take some of these relatively quickly. But onto the software side, credit checking software checks against Experian, but does not give the bookkeeper a copy of the ID. Is this okay? I thought we had to keep an ID on file.
You should keep an ID on file. Yeah.
So if you're not getting a copy of that.
No, and again, was it credit check?
Credit checking software, I'm not sure which one.
That might not be doing an AML check.
Right.
So I don't know what that one is actually checking, but you need to make sure that if you're doing online verification, you get the documentation or you are able to download it. Within the CCAB guidance, which is a consultative committee of accountancy bodies, which provides guidance that all the supervisory bodies have adopted, it does give information on what you should be looking for in your online verification software.
Right.
So it's worth having a look at that to see that the software you are using kind of ticks those boxes. But as we said before, don't just rely on online software. Use it as a backup and confirmation of what information you have already gathered from talking to your clients.
Yeah, so it's not enough on its own. And yes, TaxCalc's AML software does have identity checking features as well available. So I'm going to put this one to Mike now. We have a client that does not have any photo ID. What other check can we do, as online checks would not prove that this is the same person that we're dealing with?
Again, you've got to look at for a risk-based approach. I mean, ultimately, you need to try and get some sort of ID. If there's no passport, photograph, or any governmental document, like we even have people who use, back to the farmer, shotgun licence, anything with the photographic ID on. Some people now are having to have a photographic ID for polling, which was recently came in a while ago. That's another thing if somebody's doing that. But ultimately, you need to make sure that the client is who they say they are, and they live where they do live, and then you can include in your assessment of that client whether you're going to do business with them. If you're happy they are who they say they are, and you can satisfy your supervisory body, but again, it's a question that you need to go back to your supervisory body and say, what will you accept? Because I know different supervisory bodies will give different answers to it, and it's your supervisory body that will come and inspect you should be down for inspection. But ideally, you do need to try and get some photographic ID or that electronic verification of some. There's some electronic verification that does biometrics, but that probably wouldn't work either if they've got nothing on record. But again, justify why you've done something or why you've not done something. Ask your supervisory body, and once you get the response from your supervisory body, make a note of that as well, or keep proof that you have had that from them.
Fantastic, thank you. So I've got a lot around identity checks, etc. Can you, if you submit a suspicious activity report, can you continue to act with that client?
Yes,
so
you can.
What's the implication?
So, and in fact, initially you should continue to act for them, because if you suddenly stopped working for them, they might become suspicious, and that could cause a tipping off offence. So if they become aware that you have submitted a SAR, you are tipping off, and that is a criminal offence. If they have asked you to do a transaction that is criminal, and obviously you shouldn't do that, you need to, when you submit your SAR, request a DAML, a Defence Against Money Laundering, and you will get it should be within a week, confirmation that you can process that transaction, which therefore would enable you to carry on acting without tipping them off. So you can carry on working for them. You might not even need to request a DAML, but you've got to risk assess them. If you have submitted a SAR, they would presumably become a high-risk client. So they need to be risk assessed. You need to decide whether you want to carry on working for them. If you don't, you need to find a way to disengage without tipping them off. But yeah, under certain circumstances, it might be fine to carry on working for them.
I have a lot of sympathy for someone dealing with all of these. So you cannot, it is not can you continue to act, is you must really continue to act without.
Yeah, no, you can exit the relationship, but you've got to have a strategy to do that. If you submit a SAR, say that accountant with the farmer, good old farmer, that accountant there decided to submit a SAR and thought, I don't want anything to do with this. I know he's a long-standing client, but I don't want to get involved in anything like this. Then he could exit the relationship, but you've got to have a strategy to do that. A reason. Come up with a cunning plan as to why you're not going to use them anymore. You don't have to, but I know lots of people have submitted SARs and carrying on the business relationship with them. What you've got to remember, if you carry on the business relationship with them and something else happens, don't just think, oh, I've submitted a SAR, that's it, submit another SAR.
Right.
So if something else happens that you're suspicious of, submit another SAR.
Wise words. Okay, so we kind of over time. I'm going to ask, I've got two more questions, I can't resist, so I'm going to go through these. Can we rely on money laundering checks being done by others, e.g. a solicitor, where the client is introduced to us by that solicitor? Yep,
so that's third-party reliance. You need to get confirmation from that third party that they are allowing you to rely on it. That should be on their headed paper, and it needs to be written. The issue with doing that, though, is that you are still responsible for the information they hold. So if they haven't done sufficient client due diligence, you could still be penalised for that. So in my practice, I would not have relied on anyone else because I want to know it is all correct and I have it on file.
Right, yeah.
But you can do it.
Okay, you can do it. And one final question. What is, and you kind of touched on this earlier, Mike, what is an acceptable format for a whole firm risk assessment document? Is there a template available? And you said try and avoid templated documents.
Yeah, I didn't say try to avoid that. So if you use them, make sure you tailor them. Make sure you tailor them. As long as you cover, it's Regulation 18. They say you've got to do a whole of firm risk assessment. You've got to cover risk of the client, the geography, the services, the transactions, and the delivery channel. As long as you've got those headings, I think most supervisory bodies will have their own template, or if you're using a software company, their template. Just make sure you cover all the areas there. And make sure you've identified all the risks. And a whole of firm risk assessment usually is a paragraph about your firm, who you are, what you're about, what services you offer, the risks you've identified in those areas I've just mentioned, and what you believe the overall risk is to your how many clients you've got, how many are high risk, how many are low or normal risk, which some people use, and what the overall risk is you think to your firm by having those as clients. But yeah, you can use your own document that you've made up. You can use one of our documents. You can use one of TaxCalc's documents, anybody's documents, as long as you've got it and it's fit for purpose.
Fabulous. Okay, guys, thank you very, very much for all of that. So, yeah, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We've gone over time. We had so many questions. It does sound as if the number of people are interested in some kind of look at the our AML software. I've got a poll which I'm going to put up, which you can use. So if you answer yes to the poll, when we're asking the question of would you like to be would you like a demo of the software, then if you answer that, then you will be able to we'll get that organised. We may well come back and actually do a formal one, and we'll invite everyone who came on here to do that. I would just, if you do, if you've been inspired by my friends from Calathea, I certainly have. If you want to follow up with them, you are more than welcome. Lucy, how can they best get in touch?
Yeah, John, can you put up our offer slide? So this will show us, we will give a small discount to the first 50 people that contact us. We, as I said before, offer AML audits, so you can check how compliant your firm is, training, support packages. You can contact us at the email address info@calatheasolutions.co.uk or check out our website at calatheasolutions.co.uk.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. So without further ado, we'll sign off now. We'll let you have the rest of your afternoon back. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate you coming in. Hope you found that useful. And we will be sending a copy of this out so you can go through it all again and enjoy it in all its glory. Until then, till next time, I will sign off. All the very best. Take care.